What if reality isn't what you think? From Plato's invisible world of ideas to the mystery of free will, these 7 philosophical concepts will challenge everything you believe. Plato's theory of ideas. What if everything you see, touch, and experience isn't real in the way you think? What if the world you perceive is just a distorted reflection of something much greater? Plato's theory of forms suggests exactly that. He argued that the world we experience is not the true reality, but merely a shadow of a deeper, more perfect existence. According to him, everything we encounter in the physical world, objects, concepts, even emotions, are just imperfect copies of ideal, eternal forms that exist in a higher plane of reality. The realm of forms, a hidden reality. Imagine a chair. It could be wooden, plastic, tall or small. No matter its shape, we still recognize it as a chair. But why? Plato believed that there is a perfect, unchanging essence of a chair that exists beyond our material world. Every physical chair is just an imperfect copy of that ideal form. The same applies to everything. Trees, animals, justice, love, even you. Your body, your thoughts, and your identity are merely shadows of a more perfect version of yourself that exists in this higher realm. But if this world is just a reflection, how can we ever understand what is truly real? Plato answers this question with one of the most famous metaphors in all of philosophy, the allegory of the cave. The allegory of the cave. Are you living in shadows? Picture this. A group of prisoners has been chained inside a dark cave since birth. They can only face forward, staring at a blank wall. Behind them, a fire burns, and in front of this fire, unseen figures carry objects. Their shadows flicker on the cave wall. To the prisoners, these shadows are reality. They have never seen anything else. To them, the moving shapes on the wall are chairs, trees, and people. Then, one prisoner is freed. At first, he is blinded by the firelight, confused and overwhelmed. But as he adjusts, he begins to realize that the shadows were mere illusions. Then, he steps outside the cave. For the first time, he sees the real world. The sun, the sky, vibrant colors, depth, and beauty beyond anything he imagined. He rushes back into the cave, eager to tell the others. But they don't believe him. They mock him, calling him crazy. To them, the shadows are still the only reality they know. Now, ask yourself, could you still be inside the cave? Could the world you accept as real be nothing more than shadows on a wall? And if so, what is casting those shadows? How does this apply to you? Plato's theory isn't just an abstract idea. It has profound implications for how we live our lives. If the world we see is an illusion, then what should we trust? Our senses, our thoughts, our beliefs. Think about modern life. The media shapes our perception of reality. Are we seeing the truth, or just shadows? Or personal experiences define how we understand the world? But are we interpreting them correctly? Science evolves, proving that what we once believed to be true was just a misunderstanding. This is why Plato believed that true knowledge comes not from observation, but from reason and philosophy, from questioning the reality we take for granted. Your role in the story. Here's where you come in. The freed prisoner in Plato's cave faced a difficult choice: stay in the light or return to the comfort of the shadows. You face the same choice every day. You can question what you know, larger reality, or you can stay in the comfort of the familiar, even if it's just an illusion. So ask yourself, what if everything you know about the world is just a shadow of something greater? Are you willing to step outside the cave? What do you think? Is reality just a distorted copy of something more real? Let me know in the comments. The concept of introspection. What if the most profound answers to life's mysteries don't lie in the world around you, but in the world within? What if all the wisdom you seek can be found by simply looking inward? Introspection is the process of looking within oneself to examine thoughts, emotions, and the very essence of one's being. It's a tool we all have, but we rarely use it consciously. Think of it as a mirror for your mind, allowing you to reflect on your inner world and uncover hidden truths about your experiences, beliefs, and desires. The power of self-reflection. At its core, introspection involves self-awareness, a deep, often uncomfortable awareness of who we truly are beneath our habits, social roles, and surface-level thoughts. It's not just about understanding the what of our inner lives, but the why. Why do we think certain things? Why do we react in certain ways? The philosopher Socrates famously said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." He believed that introspection was the key to understanding not only ourselves, but the world around us. Without introspection, we are like actors playing roles without understanding the script. We drift through life, reacting to external events without truly questioning why or how we feel. The mirror of the mind. Can you trust what you see? In today's world, where external stimuli bombard us constantly, social media, news, relationship, it can be hard to differentiate between who we truly are and who we think we should be. Introspection allows us to peel back the layers of social conditioning and see ourselves as we really are. However, introspection is not always easy to trust. Just like a mirror can distort your reflection depending on the angle, introspection can sometimes mislead us. We can become too critical of ourselves or too focused on specific thoughts or memories, distorting the overall picture. This is why introspection requires not only honesty, but also clarity and balance. The benefits of deep introspection. When practiced deeply, introspection can offer remarkable benefits for personal growth. By learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can cultivate emotional intelligence and a deeper understanding of our reactions. This awareness allows us to break free from autopilot, make intentional choices, and take control of our responses to life's challenges. Introspection also helps us develop a greater sense of gratitude and inner peace as we come to terms with our imperfections and embrace our true selves. Practical ways to engage in introspection. Journaling. Write down your thoughts daily. This helps you externalize your inner dialogue and analyze patterns over time. Meditation. Clear your mind and observe your thoughts without judgment. This helps you become aware of subconscious patterns and thoughts you might not otherwise notice. Self-inquiry. Ask yourself deep, open-ended questions like, why do I react the way I do? Or what is the root of my fear? How does introspection change your life? The practice of introspection is a journey towards self-discovery and personal transformation. It opens up the possibility to not just understand ourselves, but to shape ourselves. It's not about gaining knowledge of others or the world outside us, but about gaining knowledge of our own minds. Introspection can make you more empathetic, compassionate, and self-aware. It can lead to better decision-making and deeper relationships. It allows you to align your actions with your true values and desires, rather than being swayed by external pressures or temporary emotions. Your role in the story. You are your own philosopher. By engaging in introspection, you begin to take control of your own narrative. Just as a sculptor chips away at a block of marble to reveal the masterpiece within, you can use introspection to shape and refine the person you are meant to become. So, ask yourself, what truths about myself have I been avoiding? What emotions am I repressing? And why? What would happen if I stopped looking outside for answers and started looking within? The concept of solipsism. What if everything around you is just a projection of your mind? What if the entire world, everyone you meet, and even your thoughts were all part of your own consciousness? Solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's own mind is certain to exist. Everything outside of your own mind, other people, the world itself, could, in theory, be an illusion, a product of your perception. At the heart of solipsism is the idea that our mind is the only thing we can be absolutely certain of. While we might assume the existence of the world around us, how do we know it exists independently of our perception? Everything we experience, sights, sounds, emotions, is filtered through our consciousness. This brings us to a troubling realization. We cannot truly know whether anything outside of our mind exists, or whether it's simply a projection of our thoughts. In solipsism, the external world is not something objectively real. It exists only in the context of our subjective experience. Essentially, we are the creators of our own universe, with everything else merely existing in relation to us. The problem of other minds. One of the core challenges of solipsism is the problem of other minds. If our reality is just a product of our own mind, how do we account for the seemingly independent thoughts, actions, and emotions of others? How can we explain the way other people interact with us, respond to us, and display emotions that seem to be outside of our control? This is where solipsism becomes deeply unsettling. It forces us to question whether anyone else truly exists, or if they are simply figments of our imagination, an illusion created to enrich our sense of self and our narrative. We are left to wonder, are we just alone in a universe of our own making? The limits of knowledge and perception. Solipsism isn't just about doubting the existence of other people. It's also a challenge to the limits of human knowledge itself. If we cannot trust our senses to reveal objective reality, then how can we be sure of anything? How can we trust what we perceive as truth? Philosophers like René Descartes grappled with similar questions when he doubted everything, famously concluding, cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. He argued that while all external knowledge could be doubted, the very act of doubting proved the existence of the self. Yet solipsism pushes this idea further by suggesting that even the existence of other people may be part of an elaborate illusion. Solipsism and the illusion of control. If we accept solipsism, we might feel an overwhelming sense of control over our reality. After all, if everything is a projection of our mind, then we are the creators of everything we experience. Every person we meet, every situation we face, could be nothing more than a part of the story we are telling ourselves. However, this control is often more illusion than reality. While we may feel empowered by solipsism, the boundaries of our mind remain elusive. Our thoughts, emotions, and reactions often surprise us, indicating that our consciousness is not under our control. The question remains, how much of our universe is truly ours to shape, and how much is simply an inherent part of our experience as conscious beings? What does solipsism mean for us? So, what does it all mean for us in everyday life? The idea of solipsism forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding and the fragile nature of our perception. It reminds us that, in a sense, reality may not be as solid and concrete as we believe. Our minds are powerful tools, but they are not all-knowing, and they are limited by the confines of perception. Yet, solipsism can also serve as a liberating idea. It encourages us to take responsibility for the way we see the world. If everything we experience is shaped by our mind, then we have the power to change our perception and reshape the narrative of our lives. It challenges us to take ownership of our experiences, to shift our perspectives, and to understand that we are the authors of our own stories. The takeaway. Can you truly know the world? In the end, solipsism is not a belief that everyone will subscribe to, nor is it a philosophy that can be easily reconciled with our lived experiences. However, it offers us a powerful tool for self-reflection. It asks us to question not only the world around us, but the way we engage with it. The Theodicy, Vindicating God. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, then why does evil exist in the world? Is there an answer that justifies the presence of suffering in a world supposedly governed by a benevolent creator? The problem of evil is one of the most profound challenges to the concept of an all-powerful and all-good God. Many have struggled with the question of how suffering can coexist with the belief in a benevolent deity. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, why does evil exist in the world? The challenge is to find a coherent way to reconcile God's goodness with the reality of suffering and injustice. Throughout history, philosophers and theologians have offered various attempts to answer this question through theodicy. The free will defense. One of the most famous responses to the problem of evil is the free will defense, most notably championed by St. Augustine. This argument suggests that God allows evil to exist in order to preserve human freedom. Without the possibility of choosing evil, the choice of good would have no meaning. In this view, free will is a fundamental aspect of the human experience, and while evil is the result of human choice, it is a necessary price for the gift of free will. It allows for genuine love and moral responsibility, both of which are essential for the moral fabric of human existence. Soul-making theodicy. Another perspective comes from John Hick, who proposed the soul-making theodicy. This theory suggests that suffering and evil are necessary for the moral and spiritual development of human beings. In this framework, life is seen as a process of soul-making, where the challenges and difficulties of life serve to develop virtues such as courage, compassion, and patience. Without suffering, individuals would never have the opportunity to grow spiritually or morally. Adversity becomes a means through which we are shaped and refined, allowing us to reflect divine goodness and become better versions of ourselves. The greater good defense. The greater good defense presents another answer to the problem of evil. This argument proposes that some evil exists because it leads to a greater good, which we, as finite beings, may not fully comprehend. Some argue that suffering, while deeply painful in the moment, can bring about positive outcomes that are not immediately visible. For instance, a tragic event might inspire others to act more compassionately, leading to a more just society in the long run. The greater good defense holds that while evil is a part of the world, it is a necessary part of the divine plan, contributing to the ultimate flourishing of all. The role of suffering in religious thought. Theodicy has been examined not just through logical arguments, but also through religious frameworks. Many religions suggest that suffering is not without purpose, but is tied to a larger spiritual journey. In Christianity, for instance, suffering is often seen as a way of participating in the suffering of Christ, which leads to spiritual growth and a closer relationship with God. Similarly, in Buddhism, suffering is intrinsic to the human experience, but it can lead to enlightenment once we understand its true nature. Both of these views suggest that suffering can have a deeper spiritual significance that transcends the immediate pain it brings. Challenges to theodicy. Despite these attempts to justify the existence of evil, the problem remains difficult to resolve fully. The scale of suffering in the world, particularly the suffering of innocent people, remains a significant challenge to theodicy. Can free will really explain all forms of evil? Can we truly say that all suffering leads to a greater good? And what about the seemingly pointless suffering, such as the death of children or natural disasters that seem to offer no redeeming value. These challenges raise doubts about whether Theodicy can truly vindicate God in the face of overwhelming evil. What can we learn from Theodicy? Despite its shortcomings, the Theodicy prompts valuable reflection on the nature of suffering and the role of human beings in the world. It forces us to grapple with fundamental questions about the relationship between good and evil, the purpose of suffering, and the importance of free will. Even if we cannot fully understand why evil exists, the concept of Theodicy encourages us to see suffering as an opportunity for growth, a chance to build resilience, and a means of understanding the world in a deeper way. It challenges us to approach hardship with grace and to consider the greater moral and spiritual purpose behind life's difficulties. Moral relativism. Is there one true standard of morality, or does morality vary based on culture, society, and individual perspectives? Moral relativism is a concept that challenges the idea of universal moral truths, suggesting instead that moral principles and judgments are shaped by the cultural, social, and personal contexts in which they arise. According to moral relativism, what is considered morally right or wrong can differ from one culture to another, and even between individuals within the same society. In this view, there is no objective standard that can universally define what is good or bad, but rather moral truths are subjective and relative to the beliefs and customs of different people or groups. Cultural relativism. One of the most well-known forms of moral relativism is cultural relativism. This idea asserts that moral codes are not absolute, but are determined by cultural norms and practices. What one society deems morally right may be viewed as wrong by another society. For example, practices like polygamy, slavery, or capital punishment may be accepted in some cultures, but condemned in others. Cultural relativism argues that we should avoid imposing our own cultural values on other societies, and instead respect their moral systems as equally valid. Ethical subjectivism. Another form of moral relativism is ethical subjectivism, which holds that moral judgments are based on individual preferences or feelings. According to this perspective, when a person says something is morally right or wrong, they are simply expressing their personal opinion. There is no universal moral standard, only individual beliefs. This perspective allows for a diversity of opinions, recognizing that different people may have varying ideas about what constitutes a good or bad action based on their own experiences, emotions, and reasoning. The problem of tolerance. One of the main challenges to moral relativism is its potential contradiction with the principle of tolerance. If all moral perspectives are equally valid, then can we still criticize practices such as genocide, human trafficking, or oppression? Some critics argue that moral relativism undermines the ability to stand against harmful practices because it does not offer a universal standard to judge them as wrong. If everything is relative, then it's difficult to assert that any moral action is objectively superior to another, even when faced with atrocities. The role of contexts. Despite these challenges, supporters of moral relativism argue that it promotes understanding and tolerance in a world of diverse cultures and worldviews. It encourages the recognition that different people may have different perspectives on what is morally right, depending on their background, education, or upbringing. Moral relativism suggests that understanding the context behind someone's beliefs and actions is key to appreciating why they hold those views, rather than hastily judging them as wrong. Is there a middle ground? While moral relativism promotes the idea that morality is context-dependent, some philosophers propose a middle ground between absolute moral truths and complete moral relativism. This is called moral pluralism, which suggests that there may be several valid moral perspectives, but not every moral view is equally justified. Moral pluralism maintains that, while cultural differences exist, there may be shared core values, such as respect for life or the avoidance of unnecessary suffering, that transcend cultures and can be used as a foundation for ethical decision-making. Can we be fully relativistic? At its core, moral relativism asks us to reconsider the way we think about right and wrong. But it also raises complex questions about how we navigate a world of competing moral claims. Can we truly respect cultural differences without accepting harmful practices? How do we balance cultural relativism with universal human rights? And how can we act ethically when moral norms are constantly shifting? These are questions that challenge us to reflect on how we understand morality in an increasingly interconnected world. The categorical imperative, a universal moral law. What if morality was a rule that everyone had to follow, no matter what? A moral law that's universal and can't be bent. The categorical imperative is a cornerstone of Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy, offering a powerful framework for understanding how we should act in any given situation. Unlike hypothetical imperatives, which are based on personal desires or goals, for example, if you want to be healthy, exercise. The categorical imperative applies to everyone universally, regardless of individual circumstances or desires. Kant believed that morality must be grounded in a principle that could be applied in every situation, without exception. The first formulation, universality, the first formulation of the categorical imperative, states, "Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law." In simpler terms, before taking any action, ask yourself, could this action be acceptable for everyone to do in a similar situation? This creates a moral test. If an action cannot be universalized without contradiction or harm, then it is morally wrong. For example, if you're considering lying to someone, ask yourself if it would be acceptable for everyone to lie whenever they felt like it. If everyone lied, trust would disappear and the concept of truth would become meaningless. Thus, lying would fail the categorical imperative test and is deemed morally wrong. The second formulation, respect for humanity. The second formulation of the categorical imperative, act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end, and never merely as a means. This means that we should never use people just as tools to achieve our own personal goals. Every person has intrinsic value and dignity, and we should act in a way that respects their autonomy and humanity. For example, if you manipulate someone for personal gain, you're using them as a means to an end. Kant would argue that this violates the second formulation of the categorical imperative because you're not respecting that person as an end in themselves, but rather as an object to achieve your own desires. The nature of duty. What sets the categorical imperative apart from other moral principles is its focus on duty. For Kant, moral actions are not based on emotions, outcomes, or personal desires, but on a sense of duty to follow a moral law. This makes Kant's ethics deontological, focused on adherence to rules rather than the consequences of actions. Kant argued that we have a moral obligation to act according to the categorical imperative, even if doing so does not lead to personal happiness or satisfaction. For example, if telling the truth may cause harm to yourself or others, you still have a duty to tell the truth because it aligns with universal moral law. The challenge of applying the categorical imperative. While the categorical imperative offers a clear moral guideline, Applying it can be challenging. The first formulation requires us to imagine the consequences of universalizing our actions, but this can be difficult in complex or ambiguous situations. What happens when different maxims conflict, or when a universally accepted law leads to harm? Kant's framework assumes that we can rationally determine the universal laws that should govern us, but critics argue that this assumption may be overly simplistic in practice, work relationships, or even social interactions. The challenge, according to Kant, is to ensure that these actions still respect the inherent worth and dignity of others. The categorical imperative remains influential in contemporary moral philosophy, especially in areas such as human rights, justice, and ethics in professional and political life. For example, in debates about lying, cheating, or exploitation, Kant's emphasis on duty and respect for human dignity continues to challenge us to think about how we treat others, not merely as a means to an end, but as individuals worthy of respect. In a world where ethical boundaries can often seem blurred, the categorical imperative provides a clear moral foundation. It pushes us to think deeply about whether our actions can be universalized and whether they treat others as ends in themselves, not tools for personal gain. If you've enjoyed diving into this thought-provoking topic, don't forget to like and subscribe for more philosophical explorations. Determinism versus indeterminism. What if everything that happens is meant to happen, or perhaps nothing is meant to be? The debate between determinism and indeterminism has fascinated philosophers for centuries, as it touches on the very nature of free will, the universe, and how our lives unfold. Determinism suggests that every event, action, and decision is the outcome of preceding events and conditions. Indeterminism, on the other hand, posits that not all events are predetermined, and that some occurrences are the result of chance, randomness, or free will. Determinism, the idea that everything is predetermined. Determinism is the idea that all events, including human actions, are determined by preceding causes. According to this view, everything in the universe, from the movement of planets to the thoughts we think, follows a chain of cause and effect. In a deterministic world, the future is already set in motion by the laws of nature, and even our decisions are merely the result of past events and conditions. For instance, your choice to eat pizza for dinner today could be seen as determined by a complex chain of previous causes. Your tastes, your upbringing, your emotional state, and even your genetic predisposition. One of the most well-known forms of determinism is causal determinism, which argues that every state or event in the universe is the effect of a prior cause. This aligns with Newtonian physics, where everything follows predictable laws. If we knew all the variables in any given situation, we could theoretically predict every outcome. In this view, free will becomes an illusion because everything is predicated on past causes. Indeterminism, the possibility of randomness. In contrast to determinism, indeterminism holds that not all events are caused by preceding factors, leaving room for randomness or chance. Some events happen without a deterministic cause, or with a level of unpredictability that makes it impossible to foresee the outcome. Quantum mechanics, particularly the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, provides evidence for indeterminism, suggesting that at the subatomic level, particles do not have predetermined positions and velocities, but instead, their behavior is probabilistic. Indeterminism allows for the possibility that human beings have true freedom of choice. If not all events are causally determined, then we may have the ability to influence the future with our decisions. This would imply that some events, including our actions and choices, are the result of free will rather than a chain of prior causes. If the universe is not fully determined, then we might be able to break free from the constraints of fate and carve out our own paths. The middle ground, compatibilism. Some philosophers reject the binary choice between determinism and indeterminism and propose a middle path known as compatibilism. Compatibilists argue that determinism and free will can coexist. They suggest that even if our actions are influenced by prior causes, we can still consider them free if we are acting in accordance with our desires and intentions without external coercion. In this view, free will does not require absolute independence from causal chains, but rather the ability to act according to our own motivations within those constraints. For instance, compatibilists would argue that you might be determined to choose pizza because of your past experiences and preferences. But as long as you are making that choice voluntarily, it's still your free choice. The key, according to compatibilism, is that freedom is about acting in alignment with our internal desires rather than being uncaused or entirely random. The ethical implications, morality and responsibility. The debate between determinism and indeterminism has profound implications for ethics and responsibility. If determinism is true, then our actions may be completely determined by external factors, and the concept of moral responsibility could be undermined. For example, if a person commits a crime, and all their actions were predetermined by past events, can they truly be held responsible for their actions? On the other hand, if indeterminism is true and humans have free will, we could be fully responsible for our actions and morally accountable for the choices we make. In this case, we are not just passive participants in a determined universe, but active agents who can shape our own futures. What's your take on determinism versus indeterminism? This debate between whether everything is predetermined or if there's room for randomness and choice continues to challenge our understanding of reality and human freedom. Can we ever truly act freely, or is everything in our lives just part of a bigger, unchangeable puzzle?